Yeah, it's been 3 years, 4 years time frame. So very linear, year by year. I just teed it up for you to just trash it. So go ahead.
All players, low down, active, bullseye, 1327. Post tactical. Lights on.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Merge, where we make sense of defense in an enjoyable way. We did it. We made it. This is episode 10, some arbitrary milestone in this experiment that we kicked off earlier this year, or late last year, I guess. But when I started The Merge 2.5 years ago, my goal was to make sense of defense in an enjoyable way. We're working on it. We're still working on it, and we're going to keep trying to make it better. But we know that you have a need to know, and we're trying to scratch that itch. And in the off chance that you somehow found this pod without hearing about our amazing newsletter, go to the homepage in the show notes and sign up. All right. So in the first 9 episodes, there's one thing that we did not ever talk about. We didn't have anyone about small defense tech businesses on. So today is the day that we're going to change that. And who doesn't love a good underdog story? The small tech company that's punching way above its weight class, trying to do good things. We're going to love it. All right. So to help me along today, I brought along Tim for co-hosting duties. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, what up? Thanks for having me.
You're so excited to be here, I can tell.
Oh, yeah. Always, man. I can't believe it's been 2.5 years already.
I know, it's been a while. Yeah. The hair that I've lost over the last 2.5 years tells me it's been 2.5 years.
Like way more gray, too, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah. For those who aren't tracking, Tim, he's helps me on co-hosting duties, and he's big into seeing small defense companies succeed. So natural that he would be on to help me today. No promises, Tim, but I think this episode's gonna have a special place in your heart. But before we get too far, we have one last piece of admin. Tim, do you remember hearing about any ads on this podcast?
Any ads? No, it's you haven't.
You know why? Because there are no ads. Yeah. We do it for free, and it's a ton of work, but we enjoy it, and we think you enjoy it too. So as a painless, free way to return the favor of all the work we put in, you can just go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And if you don't even have one of those, it's okay. Go to YouTube, like it, and since you're there, go ahead and click on and follow us. And bonus pro points if you just click everything. And if you're feeling really clickety, go ahead and follow us on Twitter, IG, and Facebook too. Tim, I think that's a pretty fair trade, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Mutually beneficial all the way around.
Okay. So we're going to pause right here to let you go ahead and do everything that we talked about. Go click away. All right. Admin complete. No ads, no interruptions. Here we go. So today, our special guest is a friend of mine, Andrew Scar Van Timmeren. He is the VP at Blue Force Technologies. Welcome, Scar. Tell us about yourself with one alibi. Please do not tell us about how much you love Michigan. We don't have all day.
Yeah, that's right. You'll notice above my shoulder here is a proud Michigan coffee mug because I can't not. And so, yeah, Andrew Van Timmeren, go by Scar, Raptor guy by trade, now working at Blue Force Technologies. How'd I get there? Air Force Academy, then pilot training. Was fortunate enough to drop Raptors straight out of pilot training, so flew jets for 10 years. Everybody has a story about what they did in the military, and then ultimately everybody gets out of the military. I unfortunately was medically retired from the Air Force. I was diagnosed with the neuromuscular disorder. Obviously didn't choose that. Ultimately, for everybody who gets in the military and ends up having transition, you finally have the opportunity to decide what the heck do I want to do when I grow up. And ultimately, I couldn't see myself doing anything else other than continuing to help the bros who are still in. It's popular, frankly, in many ways, I wish I was still wearing the uniform, flying with the bros, eating jalapeno corn in the bar on Fridays. And so I had the opportunity to join a company, Blue Force Technologies, and we are in the midst of trying to make a difference for those in the uniform that I still care about. And so excited to talk about it today. Thanks for the opportunity.
It's a quick question for you. Did you go to Vance for pilot training?
I sure did. Good old Enid by the Sea, Oklahoma. Yeah.
So I was there. I was class, I think it was 10-11, or it might have moved to 10-12 whenever they had like a shutdown or something. And I think I remember you from there being one of the dudes that actually dropped a Raptor during the Great Hunger Games when everybody else was getting the RPAs, man.
Well, that's yeah, good old class 1203, rocking it. It was awesome.
Okay.
And yes, dude, freaking small world, Tim. That's awesome.
Nice.
So Scar, there's a lot of stuff on your shelf behind you, but there's one thing that's not on your shelf. So Scar is the Merge's first ever return guest. We actually had him back on episode 2 on a panel. So that you are the first return guest. Congratulations. You are the one.
This is like, I'd like to thank all the little people. I'd like to thank, everybody who helped make this possible. There is some, I'll print out the certificate because of course everybody gets a trophy, and I'll put it behind me to make myself feel good. So yeah, 100% on board with that.
All right, so let's just jump into it. You told us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into defense industry. Tell us a little bit of the background of Blue Force, and then we'll kind of dig into like what we're doing, and then finally like how it's helping the bros.
Absolutely. So Blue Force Technologies, based out of the greater Raleigh area of North Carolina. We have 2 sites. We have an aircraft and composite part manufacturing site in the Research Triangle Park area, right in the direct vicinity of the airport. And then in Wake Forest, we have our aircraft integration facility, doubled in size, with those facilities over the last year. Ultimately, about 12 years old, the company is still privately held by the founder, Scott Bledsoe, and a business partner, Joe Murray. And we are principally have been focused over the duration of the company as a carbon fiber composites manufacturer for aerospace and defense purposes. So Scott cut his teeth at Scale Composites, Gulfstream, a couple other places, and stood up his own business from the lessons learned throughout those efforts. And we have, up until about 2017, 2018, principal purpose of the company has been in design build or build to print, so build other people's stuff. In 2018, we were fortunate enough to be, Boeing, no kidding, Supplier of the Year for all the work we've done in support of their projects, which is awesome. Right around that same time, as the life cycle of companies ebbs and flows, we decided to, instead of just making stuff, which is we love to do, making parts for others that they then slap their stickers on and use, we decided to get into a little bit of our own IP. We surveyed the battle space, right? You go, okay, where is the product market fit? Where do we want to make a difference? And Blue Force, run by red-blooded Americans, want to make a difference in defense, and saw that certainly in the counterterrorism fight, there wasn't a market for that high-performance unmanned fighter. There's a lot of ISR. The 0.7 Mach in less space is incredibly crowded, but there is a utility case for something that's higher performance. Decided to design an initial design of an aircraft, started pitching that around the Air Force. And ultimately, for anybody who has a small business, is interested in small business or expanding the defense industrial base, you can find a handful of roadmaps out there that essentially will hold your hand on how you can, as a commercially successful company, break into the defense industrial market. And so layering in the roadmap provided by AFWorks principally, say, hey, go get an SBIR phase 1, did that, go transition that to an SBIR phase 2, was fortunate enough to do that. And then in 2022, we were fortunate enough to be one of the few companies awarded a StratFi contract. The government matched, so there are a couple of different varieties of AFWorks strategic financing, where you can have government, venture, or investment, and then the SBA money. And we were fortunate enough to get government and SBA. We are still privately held without investment. And so we are working through that contract right now in order to build our unmanned fighter we're calling Fury. So that's kind of our story from soup to nuts of, single employee Scott founding the company to now StratFi awarded and working through trying to make a difference for the bros.
Well, that's the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. That was pretty much everything we're going to talk about today in one breath. Scar, did you rehearse that?
This is the first time I've ever said something like this. So
I'm
yes,
sure. Yeah. All right, let's go way back, and then we'll unpack those things kind of bit by bit and walk ourselves forward. So, founded in 2011, North Carolina, as basically an engineering services provider, so like a tier 2, tier 3 supplier for subcomponents to other programs. I think one of the notable cool things that Blue Force has been involved in, they've been involved in a few DARPA programs. They helped build a VTOL under the DARPA program called ARES, the Aerial Reconfigurable Embedded System. It was canceled in 2019, but they are the ones who actually manufactured the vehicle. It was a twin tilt-ducted rotor cargo drone. So it was used to move things around on the battlefield. There were some concepts where you could actually put like a personal recovery person or a medic on it, and they could fly into harm's way and pick up someone instead of a helicopter, reduce your footprint. And then, or you could just send it somewhere and crawl on it, and it could go back and forth. So it was a pretty cool concept. Got canceled, but there's some eVTOL stuff that Blue Force was involved in the recent years. But what I really want to talk about here is the process, which I think is the unique value proposition. And so, cutting your teeth as a company doing rapid, advanced prototyping, you have to come up with a special way to do it. That makes you kind of a differentiator in the market of other sub-suppliers, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you think about the value chain as a manufacturer, you want to try and tackle some of the major cost and time drivers, especially when you think about some of your customers. The calendar is the metric of success. So if you think about eVTOL or other venture-backed companies or people who are trying to break into space, and they see that getting a first mover advantage is important, or just demonstrating the ability to do what they say they're doing is important, then the calendar is the most important thing. Getting time to the ramp, certainly with an air vehicle, is what is the unit of success. And so how do you accelerate that? There are a couple of different major time and cost drivers when it comes to aerospace prototyping, but we have found, and studies prove this out, that in the NRE surrounding the tooling of the aircraft is a major time and cost driver. And so without getting into some of the things that make us unique about how we do that, we are tackling that tooling piece for these composite parts meaningfully. And that gives our customers multi-month, if not year, advantages over other methods in order to get their product out in front of potential investors or users quicker than anybody else. And so that has been one of the keys to success in our core aerostructures business.
Yeah, and we'll get into how that applies to Fury in a second, but we're not going to give away too much of the secret sauce of how they make it all happen. But what we can say, because it's on their website, is they talk about embracing soft tooling with digital engineering. That's the overview of it. So thinking of doing things completely different. They don't use steel or any metals for NRE. That's the secret sauce. So we'll just leave it at that.
This podcast is known for its spicy takes. You ready for a spicy take?
Let's hear it. I want it.
I think the term digital engineering has become overused to the point of being valueless.
Yes.
And so it has become buzzword bingo. But the value in digital engineering ultimately is that you can turn that thing that you've developed using CAD, which again has been around for decades, or other tool chains, into something real. Because ultimately, we all can agree in the conflict that we hope to never get into against a peer, our models aren't going to fight each other. Yeah. You have to build something. And so that tight coupling between digital and real is another area where we really accelerate. And so digital engineering, buzzword, has a little bit of value, but you have to turn your digital into real. And that's what Blue Force really accelerates at, or is successful at.
Yeah, and I was giving you guys props for the digital engineering. You just kind of threw the hot take right back at me. Jesus.
No,
wow.
Dude, I agree with you. This is us violently agreeing. That digital engineering is important, but
I've been on a lot of aircraft production lines, and when you actually get to like asking the right questions, very, 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 very few components are done with digital engineering today. Even though it's modern, it's 2023. The way that, and I've been at Blue Force's facility, and the way that they assure like spec compliance throughout the production process and variants through the tooling, and it's start to finish spec compliance out the door, and it's mapped to that specific product, and and I mean that's why you're Boeing Sub Supplier of the Year, right? So
yeah,
you have all the fancy certifications to back it up, but that's, I've seen that before. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah, the digital engineering side is just baked into the cake, but really how you map that to physical, and then that physical has to then feed back to the digital, and that feedback loop is where it's really important.
Yep, absolutely right. Okay, so we're talking about the process of you've been doing this, building other people's stuff, and somewhere in the 2017 timeframe, started to get moving into something as a product. So offering solutions. All right, so now here's where Tim's going to take over as the storyteller to ask you questions about how you walked through the SBIR process. That's Tim's baby.
Yeah, I mean, this SBIR process, right? It's I think back in around the 2018 timeframe, it was absolutely amazing, right? It was reliable. You could submit something, you could have some sort of an indication that, hey, we got a good chance that we're going to win now. And as I say, it's never as good as it was when you're flying the A model. Now, if you fast forward 5 years to where we're at today, trying to fight against 2,000 or 3,000 people in an open topic, how did you guys approach the submissions for that? And like, were you all by yourself, or did you tap into your relationships that you had previously in the service to kind of get sponsorships and things? And can you walk through that a little bit?
You go back to what is the intent of each of the different phases of SBIR, right? So they say get a SBIR phase 1, and that really is to give you runway to find those POCs, those points of contact that would sponsor you for the next phase, which is then that research and development, tech maturation, product market fit a little bit better, again, with user cases. And so ultimately, while I was still in the uniform, of course, got its phase 1 for its high performance unmanned aircraft. And it used Blue Force, again, this is before my time, a little bit serendipitous. I used that entire phase 1 to just door knock at Air Combat Command, up at Headquarters Air Force, anybody who would listen and hear the brief. And that's actually why I was a flightless bird, permanently DNIF, which is duties to not include flying, while I was stationed at Langley, because we don't have enough operators. You can find public information about this. We still don't have enough operators to fulfill staff requirements. Well, now here's this flightless bird with mid-gen experience at Langley. Let's have him sit in through some staff meetings. So there I was, dual hatting at the first fighter wing, and then was brought over to ACC, Air Combat Command at Langley, for some meetings. And here comes this company called Blue Force to pitch why they need unmanned high-performance fighters, principally for training. At least was the initial use case. Again, that was all under SBIR phase 1, providing that runway. Sometimes you hear innovative ideas, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that was kind of the process that hit all of us in the room was, wow, you're right. There is a real need for high performance, threat relevant training. We all recognize that. And we have a drought in the DoD in general. And so the idea sold itself. So the MOUs, memorandums of understanding, and the POCs, point of contact, who are willing to submit their support for the SBIR phase 2 was able to get accomplished. And then you're exactly right. If you think about the ratio, it's math, right? There's a numerator and a denominator. And on the SBIR submissions for open topic, the denominator has grown like crazy as far as people who are submitting, while the numerator of selections, I'm not equipped with the data to say whether that's growing or not. But suffice it to say, I think it was the fiscal year 22 end of year recap for AFWERX selections is in the single digits. If you submit a phase 2, that you'll get selected. Mm-hmm. And so there is some, I would say luck, but you got to be right place, right time with the right need or right capability in order to get selected. I don't know what the secret sauce is. Sometimes you get selected and sometimes you don't. And to be frank with you, we've submitted SBIR since that have not been selected that are in this general ecosystem. Yeah, we could talk more about what makes a SBIR successful or not. If you so desire, that's kind of how we went through the process.
Yeah, to go from a phase 1, so 2019 phase 1, so $50,000 to go do market research. It looks like Blue Force capitalized on that by door knocking. Followed that up 2020 with a SBIR phase 2. It's like $1.8 million to develop the concept and mature that out. And then, you jump forward to 2 years, you went from a $1.8 million SBIR phase 2 to a $9 million, I think, STRATFI under the Bandit program. Is that right?
Yeah. So we are. So let me just add some color there, Paco. So we have a $52 million ceiling contract supported through the STRATFI effort. So it's offset with $15 million provided a shout out to AppWorks for selecting us. Eternally grateful for the roadmap they provided, and we do see this as a SBIR success story. Following that exact roadmap, turning it into one of its Air Force Ventures, strap by backed contracts. And so we just completed. You can find public information on the interwebs about this, but we just completed our critical design review of our air vehicle. So we have table slapped that, and we are posturing for the build. And we completed our ground engine test as well. Burned some JP8 in December in Michigan, America, and we validated.
You couldn't help but weave Michigan into this.
That's right. And so we were successful in characterizing and showing how our digital toolchain matched the real, which is extremely exciting. It has the opportunity to accelerate us quicker through flight test, cheaper, using some of the tool chains we've developed. And so that is pretty exciting.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the engine in a little bit, and then I'll get back to Tim because I know he has a couple of small business questions. So that engine ground test was my understanding was to validate the novel approach for the intake flow path design. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So without getting into very specific particulars of the inlet, I'll just suffice to say that the air as it flows from the inlet through all the way to the face of the engine becomes turbulent, and the engines prefer smooth air and don't like dirty, disturbed air. And so the ability to demonstrate that we had operability throughout the envelope as best you can in a static test on the ground was extremely important. It also demonstrated some novel, again, without getting into details, leveraging additive manufacturing and some other novel techniques, quickly got our entire flow path built, mounted it to the engine, and was successful in demonstrating that our stresses matched up, our temperatures matched, and the overall manufacturing process worked for this particular use case. And so, like I said, the devil's in some of those details, which I'm not going to share, but ultimately we broke a lot of ground in a lot of meaningful ways, both on airflow, but also manufacturing on the test, which again is just going to help us accelerate going forward.
That breakthrough in your intake is what allows you to use a commercial engine instead of a military spec engine, which is a key part of the price point, right?
Yeah. One of the key parts about the engine ground test, not just the airflow flow path with the manufacturing, was that we can take a commercial business jet engine and use it for a military use case. That facilitates ease of supply chain. We are not asking for a multi-billion-dollar new engine program. We can go find engines that are off the shelf that provide fighter-like performance to our air vehicle, which again just helps accelerate the program while keeping costs low. Which, if we want to darken the skies with high-performance unmanned assets, the only way you can do it is with commercially available parts. And so that's what Blue Force is excited to do too.
Sounds like you kind of, for the StratFi and everything that you're doing really well. And that you can kind of go very far. So in the scope of what you were awarded, will you actually build like a flyable, like high performance unmanned vehicle to like actually get out there and fly against some air? Or will it do flight testing, or what's the scope of your StratFi?
You're absolutely right, Tim. The scope is to get, I'll just say, more than one aircraft out there flying through flight test. Okay. And so we are excited to be able to support that. And we're not that far away from being able to show that. And so we're pretty excited about that. Are you guys ready for another spicy take, though, regarding the SBIR process and the timelines and everything?
Yeah, man.
Hold on.
Always ready.
Yes, but before you throw water on this parade with your spicy take, I just want to highlight, if you do the math, which I have not, and I don't do math in public, I think if you go through the SBIR success story of like a percentage of a percentage of a percentage, you're in the third tranche of percentages. You're like in the 0.01% of companies that have gone through this, that have been this far through a SBIR process in this. Yeah, it's been 3 years, 4 years time frame. So very linear, year by year. I just teed it up for you to just trash it. So go ahead.
this is where I say, again, to anybody who's interested in small businesses getting integrated into the DoD, that Paco continues to be right in what I'm going to just layer on top of that. It doesn't mean that this stuff flows, that these contracts flow with no gap. And if we want to dig into the PPBE process or the planning, program, budgeting, execution process, I want to lay out an example, kind of right now. So there, at time of recording here, there is an Air Force open topic that is due on the 4th of May. And say you get selected and you'll get awarded sometime in the summertime, 2023. Now you are under let's call it nominally an 18-month period of performance, and you have either your contract with the lab or maybe a PEO or something like that. My spicy take is you're more likely than not have a valley of death in front of you. Because per our PPBE process, your organization is supporting your SBIR did not budget for you in 18 months. Or there'll be fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26. So unless there is a larger program via an IDIQ or some other work that your SBIR will nicely nest into that's already established and funded, if you are under an SBIR phase 2 right now, you probably have a valley in front of you. And that is exactly what we have experienced. Even though we were very blessed to go transition from SBIR phase 1, you can find via open source documents, there's a gap between our SBIR phase 1 and phase 2. And then we were blessed with a strat buy. We were one of the few companies very excited and to make a meaningful difference under a strat buy contract. You will find via open source documents, there is a gap between our SBIR phase 2 completion and the strat buy contract. And so how do you keep that going is principally through your commercially viable business, if you have one, or maybe it's through external funding and support in VC or PE or mezzanine debt, or however you want to execute multiple funding vehicles. It is important to be eyes wide open. And we could talk about the importance of government relations as desired. I thought there's a shout out to your previous pod with AJ Piplico, where he talked a lot about this. I just want to make sure, for those who are interested in the defense industrial base and think that Blue Force has had this easy, even if we've gone through this, there have been multiple valleys that we've had to cross. And so I want people to be eyes wide open about that real possibility ahead of them as they also try to get into the defense industrial base.
You're exactly right on the math. So the PBBE process that builds the budget that goes to Congress, that takes about 18 months. And then there's another 9 or 10 months to even get it approved. So what all that means is that at the time that you get your SBIR phase 2 awarded, you would have already had to have a wedge in the budget to transition, which is doesn't happen. So there's a 0% chance. So you have to work out of cycle requests, and out of cycle requests require congressional engagement and Pentagon engagement. And that costs money. And that's what SCAR is talking about, is you have to have other resources to help you manifest success. It's not going to happen by just going through the process.
No, in this is where, it is important for those of us who are in the middle of it right now, provide this record and this feedback to those who are interested in following, and be, clear about what is ahead. And also this is not all doom and gloom. You very well could be 6 months into your SBIR phase 2 or even a SBIR phase 1, and there very well could be within a program office an IDIQ or an OTA, an other transaction authority, or something else that is already established that your technology nests into nicely, that has already been budgeted for in the years in the past. So I'm not saying that you will not transition, but what I am saying is that you need to be eyes wide open that there are probably, or in a very general sense, no matter what your technology is, going to be some gaps in the road.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, where I was alluding to in the beginning, right? Whenever we started talking about phase 2s, is one of the ways that you could actually bridge that gap in those smaller valleys is to line up a sequential or a kind of parallel phase 2, right, for a different type of topic. And the fact that it makes it so unpredictable and it's really, really challenging to get, selected and funded with that is, it makes it really hard and challenging for the small business, right? And have you guys had any sort of support from local economic developers over in North Carolina as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, you'll find, I'll talk in again, a very general sense without regard to political party. And I don't want to make this political at all, but for the most part, defense enjoys uniform support and from both sides of the aisle. And so, especially when you're thinking about bringing in advanced manufacturing jobs, high tech, high skill jobs, that is important in rings in the local economy. And so, to answer your question in a very general sense, Tim, yes, we've gotten support from the local folks in the greater Raleigh area.
Hey, Scar, what's your head count right now? And if you don't mind sharing, and how much have you grown like in the past, I don't know, 12, 18 months since you've started your StratFi?
Yeah, I'll just say in a general sense, we've doubled in size over the last couple of years. So we've doubled our square footage, we've doubled our head count, and we expect that to continue.
Part of the reason I think you're still able to talk to us today is that you alluded to it, is like you started as a profitable, as a core foundation of your business, and now you are treating this product line as a business extension. So you didn't start a business around this product, which I think is a huge disclaimer for people that aren't really tracking out there. So they had a multiple years of production experience helping other people build products before they decided to go do it themselves.
Yeah, and that is part of what has allowed us to weather those gaps, that we've experienced, which again, just might be the nature of the game, might just be the nature of the beast. But, the commercial business supports as needed as we continue on through the gaps. And so that is, you ultimately need to ensure you have the runway somehow. So again, for those interested small business owners on how to break in and find themselves successful, starting with that base layer of commercial viability. And that's essentially what Air Force and Navy and other SBIR, SBA, everybody says, we want to bring into defense your commercial viability. And the other way you can get through those gaps is, like I said, are other financing vehicles like VC, PE, or other ways there. And so you can weather all that.
All right. Tim, you want to talk about some small business some more? Or I wanted to talk a little bit about Fury itself. I think some of the listeners / viewers would like to hear more about what it is that we're actually talking about this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, let's
it might be a critical part of the conversation.
Let's go into talking about the product, right? Yeah, and we can always go back and talk about strategies and things like that. But I think having an understanding about what you're actually building and how it kind of applies, right, will also add some good context about that small business execution strategy. Because you guys are not building something that like saves somebody time on a flight line, right? You're actually building capability, something that actually has applicability in the military field.
Yeah, and as just an aside, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is not just Blue Force, but like what our experience has been, so people who follow, can learn and be ready. And so this is, that's why I've talked a little bit about our gaps and like how you can facilitate your successes, because I know you do have a lot of small businesses trying to glean insight through a lot of these conversations. I just want to provide, that on the ground, perspective.
And a lot of times what we'll hear whenever we're, either consulting with companies or just helping out, having discussions with founders is like, the concept that they're trying to build actually doesn't have a program office, right? Or it doesn't have a PEO or somebody to kind of catch it whenever it's ready, which in a lot of ways holds them back because of the PPB&E process, right? You didn't have that wedge in there. And so there has to be a space where you can have an instead of option or alternative. Did you guys experience, or did Blue Force experience that as well? Like coming from like a hypersonic or a high performance, sorry, not hypersonic, but a high performance unmanned ad air kind of concept, right? I mean, it's almost like you didn't know you needed an iPhone until the iPhone was invented, right? I mean, did you guys experience something similar to that and then have a challenge trying to help people see the way that you see the world?
That's a really good question, Tim. And ultimately, our contract, our program management has been through Air Force Research Lab. And our contract is in combination with Air Force Research Lab and Air Combat Command. And ultimately, as kind of alluded to, and everybody I think listening probably understands or can shed some light, your end user isn't the one who buys your product. Your customer is who buys your product, which variable could be completely different, physically dislocated from your end user. And so the customer is
in reality at times.
Yeah.
In reality.
And so ultimately you may get a lot of advocacy from guys in the uniform, but you ultimately need to get the checks written by a customer. And so that is where the importance of creating product market fit in two different ways. It's the first way of ensuring, obviously, you make a difference for the operators who you're trying to impact, but also trying to make sure that those PEOs, those program offices who have actually the money palmed to them for procurement or for the RDT&E to continue to produce or continue to mature your technology or take it from commercial to a greater alignment in defense, they're the ones who ultimately are going to be paying for everything that you're doing. And so there's kind of two different product market fits there that we've had to work through. Absolutely.
So in your case, your end user is Air Combat Command. They have fighter jets. What you have, you could argue, is a fighter jet with no cockpit, but it's also a training aid. And so your PEO is probably not the PEO of fighters. It's probably someone who's in charge of training aircraft or trainers, right?
This is where I think it's a good transition to talk about what the product is that we are bringing forth. And so ultimately, Blue Force has, again, through the Silver Phase 1, Silver Phase 2, and now our existing contract, is developing a high-performance RCS-managed unmanned fighter. And we're calling it Fury. And so it is capable of 9Gs up to 50,000 feet, 0.95 Mach. And so it uses a commercial business jet engine. It doesn't have AEB. You obviously get transonic drag as you get closer to the Mach. So we'll hit about 0.95 Mach. And we have the ability to carry multiple different mission systems in the form of IR, radar, maybe some electronic attack or other capabilities. And so ultimately the goal there in the initial use case, as was identified, Paki alluded to, our program ultimately is called the Bandit program, is because we have a major quality quantity problem in our training. For those of you who are aware, football teams, and I'm going to talk about Michigan for a second. I'm an eternally sorrowful Detroit Lions fan. But if you think about the Detroit Lions or any NFL team, they have a practice squad. And that practice squad is there to best emulate and replicate the team that they are about to face this coming Sunday. That practice squad quarterback has a requirement to best emulate that quarterback that they're going to face this coming Sunday, maybe not his best actual quarterbacking. And the whole point is to create a training scenario so that if you are training your defense against a pocket passer, you play differently than if you're playing against a dual threat quarterback. Ultimately, we do that exact same thing in the military. On the ground side, you typically call them OPFOR. In the Air Force or Navy, on the air domain, you call these the aggressors. And so out at Nellis, we have aggressor squadrons. Up in Allison, we have aggressor squads. We got some T-38s in the Air Force. And then on the Navy side, they have F-5s on both coasts. And then there's also the contract services providers who bring these aircraft forth as well. Ultimately, our practice squad, so to say, has extremely capable and competent fighter pilots flying these cockpits, but they're equipped with technology from Vietnam and the 80s. And ultimately, that is not threat relevant and doesn't actually create the dilemmas that we expect to see in a very general sense in the high-end fight we are looking to, again, ultimately deter, but be prepared for. And so ultimately, there is an amazing confluence in the 2020s here of advanced autonomy for unmanned systems, but also advanced manufacturing techniques that can quickly produce high-performance aircraft. And so ultimately, our topic up to this point, or up to recently, in again, the Bandit program, has been to build a high-performance RCS-managed unmanned fighter to best replicate anything that we would see on the adversary side. If you have a 9G 50,000-foot fighter that's unmanned, it might on a Tuesday be a really good training asset, but also if we end up going to war, it would be pretty reasonable to use on the forward side as well. And so it really is is a utility vehicle where I would say it is, it may be, PEO training, but really is, the PEO for fighters, because that's essentially, it's just an unmanned fighter is what we're building. And so we're pretty excited to bring that forth.
When we say PEO for the listeners out there, we're talking about the Program Executive Office. That's the head person in charge of buying the stuff, and then the portfolio that they manage is, fighters, trainers. That's kind of what we're talking about. Yeah. So Scar, I was going to allude to that. So Fury solving the red air problem. I think it's something like 100,000 sorties a year is the Air Force requirement, and the Air Force has never ever gotten close to meeting the min requirement of adversary air. But yeah, it sounds a lot like the same attributes for affordable capable mass, which is what the Air Force is calling the collaborative combat aircraft right now.
Yeah, we're excited. We think that there, again, like you said, is a lot of utility in just, again, a high performance unmanned fighter. We actually can pray we never go to war. And then what are we going to use these collaborative combat aircraft for? Maybe it is for, flying around the flagpole, training on a random Tuesday, but they also have, and if you have a high performance unmanned RCS fighter, you might want to use it for offensive counter air. You might want to use it for defensive counter air. You may want to use it for enhancing the sensing grid overall for offboard sensing. You may want to use it for rapid logistics or other capabilities. So it's really the sky is the limit. You just have to have the performance. And so that is what we're looking to bring is a high performance capability. And then you just deviate the mission set based on what you're looking for.
I don't know if this necessarily aligns with more about what you're kind of doing, right? Specifically to Fury, but I think it kind of maybe aligns a little bit under like the digital engineering, right? Or the spicy take that you're talking about. So if the service is going to have their old antiquated technologies that are going to still continue flying, right? That maybe should have been retired a few years back. For example, one of the things that kind of comes to mind is a B-52, right? Like it was supposed to be kind of phasing out or do something, but now it's talking about flying into like the 50s or 60s or something crazy like that, even more. How would you, or is it something that Blue Force Technologies can do to like essentially digitally engineer the B-52, from its analog system? And then how would you like do something like that to upgrade it, create the models in the CAD and use all these techniques and things that you're doing to like actually do that along the service? Or is that something that is so far outside of your wheelhouse that it's not even a potential product line or things like that?
That's a good question, Tim. One of the capabilities that Blue Force does have are those modifications to existing aircraft. And so you can use laser scanners or other technology capabilities in order to create, again, and maybe an overused word, but a digital twin of what was out there real. And then from that digital model, you can create, those modifications. So we've done that I'll just say it in a handful of commercial use cases and military use cases where you can modify an existing OML or outer mold line of an air vehicle via reverse engineer, create a digital model, create the effect that you want that changes it, and then quickly produce that out into the field. And so that is something that we can do. The one thing I would say with the advanced manufacturing, I don't know if this is a spicy take or not, but with rapid prototyping and rapid iterative design, you may not ever have to produce a multi-role aircraft again. Because why would we do that if we can quickly change things and then quickly roll it out through advanced manufacturing versus just layering in more bumps, more humps, more pods, more disparate systems that are federated? Why would we keep adding more to existing airframe and maybe lower its performance versus point design and optimize against a particular use case?
Every single Viper pilot listening right now is cringing. And as a former multi-role guy myself, here's the deal, guys. If you didn't know, and this is going to be a shocker to you, everything that flies is a compromise. You have to compromise something. And so if you could design something with no compromise to execute a mission at such a level because you're not constrained by having to do this, that, and the other, it really unlocks the power of what you can achieve. And by doing the advanced manufacturing, the production costs go down so much that instead of building one $100 million airplane to do 3 missions. I could build $33 million airplanes that do each mission better.
It's a really good example, Paco. So I want to pull on that a little bit here. So if you have 3 different missions where you want to actually point design 3 different aircraft, the muscle memory of the ability of those aircraft to fly doesn't atrophy unlike a human. And so if the mission requires aircraft B, it doesn't require aircraft A or C, then don't fly A or C and use aircraft B when you need it. But when you need aircraft A and C, you don't have to just retrain that pilot. You don't have to retrain or try to warm them up again and bring them up to the latest skills. You just turn the computer on and fly the unmanned system, and it's optimized against that particular use case. And so I think it has to be okay that not every aircraft has to be able to do every mission, because we actually can, again, through commercial technologies, commercially available parts, and rapid manufacturing, and some automation turning into autonomy, we can meaningfully point design and optimize aircraft for missions. And if your airplane is not needed for a particular mission set, then don't use it. That has to be okay. And so I think that's a different way to think about things.
If you go by and use a metrics of performance, an Air Force inexperienced fighter pilot today has to fly 9 times a month. And so in 3 months, he has to fly 27 times. And so even if the cost, again, math in public, let's say it's 30 times a month and it's $20,000 an hour. And let's say each flight was an hour, that's 30 times a lot, right? So you get in the millions of dollars, right? But and a lot of time from people. Well, if you have something that doesn't require the atrophy of a human into consideration, maybe it flies once every 90 days. Maybe it flies once a month. And that's really just to exercise the components, and you just have kind of a periodic inspection of the things, like the hardware and software. But you don't have to worry about the pinkware, the human.
You're exactly right. If a mission set requires penetrating ISR, then use the vehicle that's best for penetrating ISR. If the mission requires cruise missile defense, then use the vehicle that's best for cruise missile defense. Don't use the penetrating ISR vehicle for cruise missile defense. And so that really opens up an entire aperture of optimization, which can really layer in increased capability in effectiveness while lowering the cost. And so I think that's what's really meaningful with the confluence of, again, advanced manufacturing and software development.
We're getting short on time here. I do have one tee up for potentially a spicy take for you, but before I do that, I want to hand it off to Tim for any final questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious what's next for you guys, right? So the StratFi either comes to an end. Are the other phase 2 SBIRs and then another StratFi to kind of build upon this and scale horizontally, or are you going deeper? And then maybe if you could maybe finish with an ask, right? If the pod gets to somebody in the halls of the Pentagon and they haven't heard about you before and they like what they hear, maybe there's something that you guys are having trouble with or that you need some support with. Maybe you can throw that out there and see if you get any bites.
Hold on a minute. Well, so based on that, that's a great way to end it. And so we want to end on a good note. So before we do that,
okay,
I just want to throw out, potentially this might be tied together. All right, Scar. So here's the deal. On Blue Force's website, you advertise an advanced manufacturing process from basically design to deliver in 12 to 30 months, which is awesome, right? In your experience, has the Air Force been able to keep up with the pace of advanced manufacturing that you guys do, as far as program management and oversight and the speed of business versus the speed of government?
What I would say here is that there is a lot of commercial pace is dictated by the funding profile that the government has. And so I think that a lot of it is unlocked by the funding availability. And so there is an opportunity for the government to move at the speed of the commercial business. Yes.
That is a very political answer. I realize that you're circumventing the spicy response. So, all right, you can answer Tim's question now.
Yeah. So what is next? Ultimately, we are hyper focused on getting flying, and so every technical roadblock, every regulatory, which are real roadblocks, everything that is, well, again, technical and non-technical in nature, we are working through right now ultimately to get flying as soon as we possibly can. And we are eager to demonstrate and be provided the opportunity, which the government is providing us this opportunity, to actually demonstrate that small business is capable of doing what it says it can do. We've done it this far, and so we are excited to do that as we continue. What is my ask? I'm actually going to go a little bit outside of autonomy and advanced manufacturing, and I just want to bring something forth having to do with security classification. And so there is a major issue when it comes to, and it's been well publicized by senior leaders in the DoD, that the DoD in general is very good at overclassifying everything it does. And when it comes to small business, you, especially if you are commercial and then pivoting into military, the administrative process by which you can get a DD-254, which is the process by which you're approved for security clearance, and then ultimately getting a physical location stood up, it can be a challenge and can slow innovation down. And so there is a way for the government to help break through. Again, these are not technical problems. These are regulatory challenges. And the overclassification of programs by default benefits the incumbents. And so there's meaningful work to be done on bringing classifications down or opening up the aperture. I think the DARPA Bridges program is a great first step. And for those who are not aware, there's a program, if you are a small business and you do not have a facility clearance, go ahead and look online at DARPA's website for the Bridges program. You can find information on that. I think that classification is in classified work is an initial barrier to entry for expanding the defense industrial base. So I'd be interested in having a further conversation on that.
All right, I'll give you my spicy take. 100% agree. It's atrocious. It's terrible. There's a whole history about how it started and where it is. As we record this, don't put anything on Discord. So that's there's probably like an apprehension now a little bit about that, that's its own
no kidding.
Rabbit hole of ridiculousness. But here's my spicy take. The fact that DARPA had to stand this up to recognize that this is such a big problem. Like, this is not a technology problem. This is a policy bureaucratic problem. The fact that DARPA has had to allocate their money and their resources to solve what is inherently an internal Pentagon problem is stupid. And the fact that the Pentagon has not said, hey, DARPA, that's actually not your problem to solve. It's ours. We got it. And someone in the Pentagon goes, here's the office. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to embrace small business. We're going to give them the tools, the benefit of the doubt. And there's temporary facilities. There's temporary access. There's all of these things that you can do to lower the barriers of entry. And they're not doing it. So yeah, that's my spicy take. I'm tired of being a negative. All right. End us on a good note.
You want me to end us on a good note? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah. Where can they find more information about what Blue Force is doing?
So you can go find our website, blueforcetech.com. You can, look us up on various media locations. You can find Blue Force and me on LinkedIn, entirely too active on that platform, but excited to interact with anybody who is interested. And if there's a small business out there genuinely just looking for help, shoulder to cry on, or someone to talk to you about, the path that we've followed, I'd love to provide a meaningful difference in your company's lives. So let us know how we can work together. But excited, and thanks, Paco, for this opportunity to be here today.
So what I heard was, Scar, you were offering a shoulder for people to cry on.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us.
Mostly Ohio State fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. That sounds like a wrap to me. Thanks for joining us on the show. And if you made it this far, please, please, please go the extra distance. Give us a good rating on iTunes, Spotify. Spread the word about the merge. That's it. We're out. See ya.